Hello, it is Jack Gill, and welcome back to Redmen Academy. Me and James have both had a break in the last week or so, as it's been both our 21st birthdays, but we're back now and ready to talk about the Reds again. There's been a bit of news in recent weeks. We've been soaking up the celebrations of the title win and our birthdays, of course, James. But I think we've come back to reality pretty quickly. You know, the lads are back in training next week. The new season is just around the corner. The big Champions League summer tournament thing that's not the Champions League that will have an asterisk on it. Starts tonight. The Europa League was last night. For football is coming back very, very quickly, James, and the whole coronavirus thing means there's a shorter pre-season and there's not much time to get transfers done. And we've seen with other clubs such as City and Chelsea trying to get deals done pretty early. And with Liverpool, it seems like it's going to be a pretty quiet summer.
Yeah, I can't see us getting much business done, really. It's sort of just addressing the little issues that we have. There might not be sort of glaring issues like, I know the way City need another centre-back or Chelsea have needed to reinforce their attack, but it's just more about supplementing what we have and looking to maybe cover those little gaps that become more obvious as the season goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing is you look at Arsenal yesterday, and I'm throwing you under the bus going down this route a bit, but with their 55 redundancies and they're still at the same time being linked with big money moves to Willian and Coutinho and Ozil, who they didn't use after Project Restart, as there's no sign of him exiting the club. Our club's going about it a more professional way and a better way during this. They got a lot of stick for the furlough campaign, and now they're sort of saying, you know what, we'll keep this. We're not getting as much income. We'll get deals where and when we can, but there's no need to go out and spend a whole load of cash during these times that are uncertain times, James.
Yeah, I think we'd all, if we could have to choose between, keeping the club stable and keeping the personnel at the club who are already there, or going all out for a player, I think we'd all pick keeping people employed. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to see anyone losing jobs, and it's disappointing to see what's happened at Arsenal. And at the same time, they are looking to spend, hundreds of thousands of pounds a week on new players. So, I'd rather we go for these smaller signings and just look to bring them into the team gradually, rather than go all out on someone who really isn't going to improve our starting 11.
Absolutely. I think the big thing for me, James, and the big factor into this is I've spent most of the time since January talking about how much I like Timo Werner, and just because he's joined Chelsea, it doesn't change the fact that I think he would have been an excellent addition to the team. And I think what's different now is with the AFCON being moved from January, there is not a necessity to get that backup winger that can challenge, that backup forward that can challenge. And I think now the difference is we've got Salah and Mane for the whole season. There won't be an interruption. We won't be losing them for 2 months. So we can now look ahead to next summer and getting a player in of Werner's calibre to compete next summer. But now I'd be happy with someone like Said Benrahma or we've got Harvey Elliott, who'll probably get more opportunities. I think there isn't a need for us to go out and splash a load of cash this summer, whereas for clubs like Chelsea and United, who finished 33 points behind us, don't forget that there is.
Yeah, exactly. Next summer the situation might be completely different, where we will have that disposable income to go all out. There's no point as taking loans from the owners or accepting handouts from the owners to spend money because we're not generating it ourselves. I'd rather we stay in a financially healthy position and then next season look on to sign players even when problems arise.
And don't get me wrong, it's horrible missing out on players like Sancho and Werner, but when you see how much they're getting paid by Chelsea and Man United, we can't compete. We can't compete with that on a normal market, let alone with the coronavirus pandemic and everything that's gone on in the last few months. So, it is difficult, and maybe a wage cap is a route that the Premier League will go down in the future or something like that. But right now, I think it's important looking at players to replace this summer rather than bringing in players like, for example, I think Thiago, who's been heavily linked. I think he comes if someone goes. I think it's as simple as that. I think if Milner or Wijnaldum are to depart, then we'll probably see Thiago coming in. If not, I think Thiago won't become a Liverpool player. But talking of that, we'll look at some players that may be joining the club this summer. I think a backup left back is one position that we will definitely sign someone in. And over the last few days, news has there's been reports that we are interested in Jamal Lewis. Now, this is very interesting, James. Melissa Reddy reported 2 nights ago that we are interested and that we will pay it up to 10 million. Some other stuff's come out since then, like Norwich are interested in Larouci, which will obviously be a part of the deal. Also, the fact that Norwich want double what we are willing to pay. They want 20 million. For me, James, Jamal Lewis is the perfect backup to Robertson, and I want it done.
Yeah, I do like, and I know he's had quite an underwhelming season this year, but forget he's a young lad coming into the Premier League and playing for the worst performing side in the league. He's not going to have the freedom that he had in the Championship the season before. He's not going to have that sort of ability to showcase his talents, which we know how good of a player is. We know he's a good dribbler. We know he's a good crosser of the ball, and he's just not been able to show that this season. There aren't many players that have shown in that team, and yet he's still been one of the stronger players when they have played relatively well.
Yeah, well, when Norwich came up to the Premier League, a lot of people had their eyes on their young fullback straight away. And I remember in the transfer market, teams like Chelsea expressed an interest in both Max Aarons and Jamal Lewis, and there was a lot of interest in both of those. But they had a difficult season, like you said. It's not been what they wanted it to be, but nonetheless, you can see their qualities, and you could see that Jamal Lewis would fit into the Liverpool system perfectly. And I think he's still very, very young, and to me, the whole deal is eerily similar to the whole Robertson situation. Being signed from a club that's just gone down from the Premier League, and a player that is young, fits our system. Everything about it, I think, is very similar, and I'm really excited by that. The only issue I think is going to be that transfer fee. There's also many other clubs interested in Jamal Lewis. Reddy said that in her article, which means that there may be clubs willing to spend a lot more than us on him.
Yeah, and we've got the likes of Everton who are also looking to go into the market for another left back this summer. They could easily, right now they can probably have more disposable income than we have, which is a strange thing to say, but they are looking for a left back, and he's got that quality where a lot of the top sides are looking at him. And obviously, if we're interested, it's no surprise that there are other sides, looking to snatch him up too. The fee isn't astronomical, but right now it's just a matter of looking at saying, is he worth 20 million? Probably not. Is he worth 10 million plus Lars Sarucci? Maybe you've got a deal there.
Yeah, our fullbacks are integral to our system, and you've seen at times when we're missing Robbo or Trent, we're not the team that we are with them both. And to have brilliant understudies like we've seen Nico Williams can be for Trent, to have someone on the left-hand side that's a fantastic understudy when Robbo isn't available, I think is integral. And maybe biting the bullet a bit and paying a couple of million more to get Lewis in, and including Larouci in the deal, I think will be worth it in the long term, because Jamal Lewis will fit the system perfectly. And honestly, it's a deal that I am very, very excited by, and I really hope can happen. Like you say, he's not had the greatest of debut seasons in the Premier League, but he's got that experience under his belt, and he'll be playing for a lot better team in a system that suits him, Jamal Lewis, and he'll be an understudy. He'll be able to learn from one of the best left backs in world football right now, in Andy Robertson. So, I think that would be a great move, and let us know in the comments what you think. Another question, James, is if we don't get Jamal Lewis, who else do we get to cover Robbo at left back?
I mean, it depends what kind of player you go for. Whether you want to go for a more defensive player, whether you want to go for someone who's a like-for-like replacement. And I've been having a little look around, and I've seen Aaron Martin playing for Mainz. He's 23 years old, not long turned 23. Arrived in 2018 initially on loan, was made permanent last summer for 5 million. I'm looking here at his offensive stats. He's playing 1.5 key passes a game, 0.9 dribbles. He's a very, very good player, and obviously Mainz haven't had the strongest of seasons this year. He could be available for a similar price, I'd say, to Jamal Lewis, and he's someone that I really like the look of, especially since the restart.
Yeah, there's also another name that's being spoken of, and that's again, I've seen it on Twitter. I've not seen it said out loud, so I'm really sorry if I butchered his name. But Konstantinos Smikas. I do not know how to say it. I'm really butchered that. Smikas, whatever it is. Please, somebody tell me how to pronounce this. There's one reason I don't want us to sign this lad, James, and that is because I can't say his name.
Yeah, I mean that's a red flag right there, isn't it?
Yeah, but yeah, I can't say I watch Olympiacos too much. His stats are decent. You know, he can play left back or left midfield. He's played 20 times for them in the league this year. He's got 5 assists. You know, straight away, it looks like he's a player that would do well in our system. I don't know how much he'd cost, but you know, he's a player that we could also bring in if we don't get Lewis.
Yeah, I've got some of his Champions League stats up here, and he's got a combined 4 key passes and dribbles per Champions League game. Obviously, it's a small sample size, only 7 games, but you know that's ridiculous. Those are ridiculous stats. You know, Olympiacos aren't necessarily teams that you're going to expect to have such flying fullbacks in the Champions League, and yet here he is with 2.3 dribbles and 1.7 key passes.
Yeah, I think it's one of them where we're just going to have to wait and be patient. What happens? I am confident on the Jamal Lewis front. I really am. I think the fact that you know Reddy, Joyce, Pierce, Maddock have all reported saying that there's interest and you know that there's that fee. I think it looks likely. You know, I think also with Jamal Lewis, he wants us. I
Yeah.
think that's been in the reports, and you know, he's also belongs to the same agency group as Robbo and Trent, so that might be a big factor in the deal as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm confident we can get it done. Moving on, James, to the centre back position, we've seen Dejan Lovren depart to Zenit. We did a video speaking about this and saying that you know thank you, Lovren, for everything he's done for the club. At times, there's been highs. You look at Dortmund, you look at the Champions League final in Kiev, which obviously was a low for the club. But I think for Dejan Lovren, it was a very good performance from him, and the whole Karius thing overshadowed how good Dejan Lovren was that night. I thought he was fantastic, but you know, there's been some lows for him as well, and you know, he's now out the door, and it's about bringing in a fourth choice centre back who can, you know, provide when the class Matip and Gomez are injured. We've seen in the last couple of seasons, they're not. They're players that are quite prone to injury, aren't they? And they can both be injured at the same time. We've had it, and Fabinho has had to step up in the centre back position. We're in a situation now, James, where do we trust youth? Do we bring through Kiana Hoover and Sepp van den Berg? Or do we go out and buy a fourth choice centre back? And for me, I favour bringing in Ben White.
Yeah, I mean, it's even if you don't trust the youth, it's whether who you bring in is an experienced player or whether it's a young player again, and you look to, you know, bring them up to speed and mold them into the player that you want them to be, rather than buying someone who's going to be at the club for 3 or 4 years, then get moved on. So it depends whether we want short term or long term success. You know, I think Ben White we've spoken about a lot of times. He's someone that we're both a massive fan of, and I think you know you would probably pay a little bit more for him than you would, you know, your typical fourth choice centre back. But he's got the ability to, you know, push himself up the pecking order and look to assert himself. He's got that hunger. He's got that, you know, he's got that. I don't know what it is, that flair about him that he makes it look so easy when he's, you know, in defensive actions or when he's bringing the ball out of the defence. And I think we'd be gutted if we saw him go to a rival club because he's a very, very good young player.
The issue is with Ben White, there's no doubt we're a fan of him. You know, we spoke a lot this year about how the club have scouted him, but I think he's going to cost too much, and that's what I think is going to put us off. There's a lot of talk about Mandy from Real Betis, 28 years old. You know, he's getting on a bit, and it's clear, as you said, it would be for short-term success, and it'd be for coming in and him doing a decent job as fourth choice centre back. But yeah, I trust Kiana Hoover personally, and I think he'd do a good job if needed, being a fourth choice centre back. The issue is, as we've said, there's been times before where we've needed Dejan Lovren because both Gomez and Matip have been injured, and I don't really want to throw Hoover under the bus when we've got a really tough run of fixtures and he's getting his first run in the first team. Then, but I suppose if you don't start somewhere, then you're never going to start.
Exactly. You know, we could be looking back, you know, this side next year thinking Huiber's been our standout young player of the season, and that run that he has, you know, 7 games over Christmas was what gave him that bit of momentum to keep himself in that team and become a proper fourth choice centre back. It it's so hard to tell how these young players are going to develop, and you have to start somewhere, like you said, and why not now?
Exactly. Is there any other names that you can think of that you like bringing in
I
if we
mean,
centre back?
I think centre back's a hard one, isn't it? Really, and obviously we saw Lloyd Kelly's name being thrown around. I don't think we're both very keen on that. Apparently, the club was slightly put off about the way things were conducted last summer too when he moved to Bournemouth, and regardless of that, he's missed, what is it, 17, 19 games this season through injury. He's not really someone that you want to be able to have to rely on at a moment's notice.
He's someone that Bournemouth will look to replace Ake in the Championship, isn't it?
Yeah.
As well, he's someone that they'll look to this year. As you say, he was a man that I looked at and thought he would be a typical Liverpool signing. We were interested last year, and he's diverse. He covers centre back. He also covers the left back problem too. So, I think he would have been a good signing, but he's not impressed this year, as he with Bournemouth. As you say, he spent a lot of it out injured. And the way it was all conducted last summer, I think, as you say, has put the club off. So I don't think he's a name we're looking at, but I can see it being like you say. We get an experienced player like Mandy in for a couple of years, and then maybe look for a younger one to come in when Matip's getting older as well. But yeah, I think it's one of them where personally I'd either go big and get Ben White in and get another class centre half, or I'd trust the youth. And
Exactly.
it's as simple as that for me. I wouldn't look at Mandy personally myself, but I can understand why the club doing it. Like you say, if Hoover's not quite ready yet, if he still needs a year or so before he's ready, then it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what's confusing me the most is with Mandy, because he's been identified by the club as someone who's the ideal person to come in, and yet their fans seem quite not happy, but they're not disappointed that he's being linked with a move away, and that's what I don't seem to understand. Where he's highly regarded at Betis, and he's clearly highly regarded at the decision makers at Liverpool, and yet their fans just don't seem too bothered at all.
From what I've seen of him, he's a decent centre half, but he's not the greatest of it. For a forward choice, it'd be decent, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see him starting week in week out for Liverpool. But that's just from what I've seen from him, and he's cheap, isn't he? So for a
Yeah.
fourth centre back to get him in and he do the job for a couple of years until Hoover is ready. I
Mhm.
think it won't be too bad, but we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? At the end of the day. Thanks for joining me, James. Let us know what you think in the comments about left back and centre back. Who should we sign? They look to be the positions that Liverpool will strengthen and will bring in this summer. And yeah, me and James will be back over the next couple of days to look at transfer business from other clubs and see how it's going there. Cheers for joining me, James, and we'll see you again soon. So.